And so you can say, okay, well, you can't experience a perfect circle. You can't experience true beauty. You can't experience true justice because we only have appearances here on this earth. And I disagree. I think that there is a perfect circle, that there is something that's perfectly just. And I think that there is something that is perfectly beautiful. And his name is Jesus. What's up? It's been a little bit. It's because it's cold. I'm trying not to get hit by cars because there's no sidewalks right now. But I want to hop right into this. So I've been thinking a lot about Eastern and Western thought and the differences between the two, and could they somehow be harmonious? And I think they can. I think I'm on track with something in a way that you can stick these two things together, separate the wheat from the chaff, and find a way that they are harmonious. So I'll go a little bit through the differences between the Eastern and the Western thoughts, and then how I think that they're actually not opposed to each other, but there's a way to stick them together. So in Western thought, it's commonly understood that there are things that are called forms. These forms are things that don't change. So you have appearances, which is like the weather's always changing, people are always changing. You have things that are birthed and die, and there's a time for, like the ecclesiastical, there's a time for war, and there's a time for peace, a time for love, and a time for hate. So that type of idea, that there's things are always moving and ever flowing. And then you have the idea that there are things that don't change, and these things are like truth or beauty or justice, right? And the philosophers of the West would spend a lot of time arguing towards these things. They would say things like the fact that beauty appears in the sunset, it appears in physical attributes, it appears in music, it appears in paintings. They aren't separate things, right? Beauty just appears there, but they point towards the idea that there's a beauty in and of itself that is basically popping up in all these different places. And the thing he said was, like, draw a circle, and somebody would draw a circle, and you'd be like, okay, is that a perfect circle? And they'd be like, no. And be like, does that mean it's not a circle? It's like, no, it's still a circle, it's just not a perfect circle. You'd be like, okay, is there such a thing as a perfect circle? Be like, okay, yes, that's the ideal. So whatever the idea of circleness is the thing that's unchanging. It's the thing to aim for. It's the idea that circles appear in everyday life. You know, you got the sun, looks like a circle. You got that moon, sometimes looks like a circle. These wheels over here look like circles. Are they perfect circles? I don't think so. But the idea of the perfect circle is a thing, at least in the Western thought. Then you have the Eastern thought. The Eastern thought is, no, everything is always changing. There is no forms. There is nothing that never changes and is solid throughout all time. All you have is fading experience. In fact, they even go to the point where they say, even you aren't a thing. The Buddhists specifically will say, there is no self. There is suffering, but there's no sufferer. There are thoughts, but there is no thinker. And that's a little confusing, to be honest with you. I'm like, I don't understand that. It doesn't really make sense to me, because the second that you start saying that, okay, let me put it this way. You can look at someone like Descartes, who's of the West. Descartes was famous for doubting. He doubted reality in its entirety. He would look around and he would say, everything could be an illusion, it could be fake. And he did that with everything up until the point where he said the quote, I think, therefore I am. What he meant by that was, you can doubt everything in life, but you can't doubt the fact that you're thinking. The fact that you're thinking means that you exist. But then I would say, well, you could just be viewing thoughts and them still not be your own, but you think that they're your own, like a movie playing, and you think that you have free will, but you don't. You're just watching. But you cannot deny the fact that you're experiencing whatever this thing is. Because the fact that you're experiencing something means that you're conscious of it. And the fact that you're conscious of it means that you're conscious. So, I drew the line back even farther. Now, the Buddhist would say that that's where life is found, is inside of the experience itself, rather than the thinking. That's the difference between the East and the West. The West is all about the thinking, and the Eastern is all about the experience. Now, you can't draw, you can't have, you can't lean only on one side, and let me tell you why. So if you're on the East and you only experience, then what's going to happen is you're going to get rid of all forms, the unchanging things, the ideas, the rules, the religion, the idea of a God. You have to get rid of all of that, because there are no things that are unchanging. And God is unchanging. His rules are unwavering. He's consistent across all time and all places. And so if you don't believe in that, then suddenly there is no God. And then you can't exist. And that's what I was getting to earlier. You can't exist, because even though you are changing over time, the fact that you exist is consistent across time. So that must not be true. And so there is no you, there is no God, there is only the present moment. And even in the present moment, everything is birthing and dying all at once. It's always changing. And that means that the way to what they call enlightenment or awakening is to understand that everything's always changing and that nothing is ever the same, and to release yourself from all sorts of unchanging ideas. So once you release yourself from the rules, the religion, and all that stuff, you can see things for what they really are. And that's what they claim, what it really is. They can see things for reality, right? And I think that's interesting, but I think it's a half-truth. And there's a contradiction inside of it. And let me tell you what I mean. Anytime somebody says, it's not this way, it's that way, they're making a claim that they have the truth. Okay, well, first of all, for it to be true across all time and across all places, it has to be a form, because it's unchanging. So that's a Western thought. But the second thing is, if you say you have to get rid of all forms, and that's how you can see, that in and of itself is a contradiction to what you have just said, because you'd have to subscribe throughout the rest of your life to the idea that you have to get rid of forms, which means if that thing is a form and you have to get rid of forms, you would have to get rid of that idea. It's a self-defeating proposition. You can't do that. Okay, so let's say that you do it anyway. You are unaware of the fact that that's a self-defeating sentence, and you try to practice it and reach enlightenment or whatever. Well, the second that you get rid of religion and rules and social standards and the idea that justice is a thing in and of itself, the second you get rid of all that, all you've done is make sure that, one, you're isolated, because you have no common standard of which to meet people on. There's no bridge of which you can be like, oh, we agree on this, because you don't exist, and you're ever changing, and God doesn't exist, and the universe is ever changing, which means that everything's different all the time, and you can do whatever you want, because that leaves morality up to you. It's subjective at that point. And the second that you guys ever meet on anything together, one, you don't have to stay there, because everything's subject to change. There's nothing that's unchanging. And two, you have no reason to have connected, because there's nothing higher than you holding you to that standard. You're the standard at that point. God doesn't exist. And so then you would say, okay, one, you're isolated, and then two, if you only experience things and you never think, then you're dumb. Like, you would just experience life never learning and never thinking and never analyzing. And you just become like this unrelationable, isolated being who just walks around and does whatever he wants. And that's not useful to society, and it's also not useful to yourself, because you don't have a way to connect to people now. And then you say, well, the Buddhist or the Eastern thought, it's like, yeah, you can definitely connect to people. And it's like, only if you subscribe to the fact there are things unchanging. Like, for you to be in relation with somebody else means that you exist and they exist and you are relating to each other. If you throw those out the window, conceptually that's not possible. But you don't. You think you do, but you don't. You're actually experiencing what a relationship is from you. There is a you. You have the decisions you make, and then you're the decider. You have thoughts, but you're the thinker. There is suffering, but you're the sufferer, right? And you relate to somebody else who also has a self under the construct of the forms that are truth given to us by the unchanging creator. So that's the downfalls of the Eastern thought. The downfalls of the Western thought are pretty heavy too. So on the Western thought, you have the idea that there are things that are unchanging and that they are above this world. And they'll even go as far as to say, you know, things that are changing are just appearances, and you can't rely on them. You can't rely on your feelings. You can't rely on the appearances of the sunsets. Even though they have beauty, it's not beauty itself. You know, it's the imperfect circle. We can only rely on the perfect circle. And so where does reality lie? Well, reality ultimately relies in concept. They say that like in your mind, the virtues that you find in your mind are more important than like everyday life, right? Because if you philosophize and you figure out what is true across all times and all places, you're going to be able to handle the separate appearances. Now, I agree with that more than the other thing, but I think it's missing some stuff. And what I mean is I want to clarify how I think that the two go together. And so the downfall of the West is that, and the philosopher, and I've been subject to this, unfortunately, is if you spend all of your time thinking and not experiencing, you live a half life. And what do I mean by that? So we have different functions. We have different faculties. We have the belly, the heart, and the mind. The belly are like your cravings. You know, I'm hungry. And then the heart is like the way you feel, what you desire. It's how you connect to people on an emotional level. And the mind is where the blueprints are. It's the faculty of reasoning. And so if you only live in your mind, you become a machine. And you start to see things through concept only. Now, what do I mean by that? If things are forms, you see things through forms, and forms only, it's like handing somebody a form and saying, hey, sign this. That's a relationship, but the relationship is on a document. The document is not supposed to be the relationship. The form is not supposed to be the relationship. The form is supposed to be the foundation of the relationship so that you guys have something similar to stand on, right? We hold each other accountable. The second that the form becomes the relationship, you have retraded the beauty of the experience of the relationship for the sake of the contract, right? And we see this everywhere. You know, there's a difference between writing the music down on a piece of paper and listening to it. There's a difference between trying to understand what a sunset looks like conceptually and actually experiencing it. There's a difference between the contract and the relationship. I say this all the time, and it's because it's so true. So what's the philosopher's downfall? The philosopher's downfall is they spend so much time in concept, they don't experience the thing. And so you can say, okay, well, you can't experience a perfect circle. You can't experience true beauty. You can't experience true justice because we only have appearances here on this earth. And I disagree. I think that there is a perfect circle, that there is something that's perfectly just. And I think that there is something that is perfectly beautiful. And his name is Jesus. And you can experience it. So here you have one of the biggest downfalls that I've come to learn over time is in the West specifically, we have this hustle culture. We want to learn and we want to grow and we want to try to grasp and handle things so that we can build. And so we spend a lot of our time learning about Jesus conceptually. And that's fine. But it's not the end goal. You don't study somebody's autobiography so that you can know them from heart to heart, right? That only makes it so that you know them with your head. And so we make this mistake with Jesus. We read our Bibles, but we don't pray. You know, we go to church, but we don't trust that he has our future handled. We doubt. And it's like, if you were to do that exact same thing in any other relationship, it would be so obvious. It's like you never pay attention to them. Like sit down and talk to them and try to listen to them and understand them. You don't trust them, you doubt them. It's like that relationship's not going to work out. But we do that with God. We do that with Jesus. And so the philosopher, the heavy Western thinker, gets so caught up in concept that they miss out on reality. They miss out on the experience. And so you have both sides, right? You have somebody who only experiences and cannot understand the fact that there are things that are true across all time and all places. So they're isolated and confused and kind of useless because they can't do anything. And then you have the Western thought, which is, I only see half truths, which is, I understand that there are things that are unchanging, but I don't have a relationship with it. I don't have an experience with it. And what happens is when you pray and you trust in Jesus, all of the concepts that you have in your head from the verses that you've read on the pages and the sermons that you've listened to, they go from here, the mind, down to your heart and your spirit, because that's what true understanding is. True understanding is when you can see things the way that Jesus sees things. You can do things the way that Jesus would do things. But you can only do that if you trust in what he says. Trusting in what he says is different than conceptually knowing it, right? It's a different layer of understanding. And that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is being able to see things from the viewpoint of God. Being wise is being able to do things the way that God would do them. But how do you get there? Well, you merge the East and the West, right? You need the experience, but you can't get rid of the form. You have to have rules that unite people, you know? Self-sacrifice, love your neighbor, don't murder. Like those things are unchanging things for a reason. You know, we build societies off of them. But you also need to get out of your head. If you live in concept, you live a half life. So yes, you are extremely useful to everybody around you, except for yourself. It's like, you're not experienced, like, just sit back and enjoy the sunset and thank God that he painted the sky for you. You know what I'm saying? It's like, pray to him and say, hey, I trust you. You know, like, I know my future's shaky. I know that there's a lot of troubles going on right now. My kids are acting funky and I don't know what to do about it. My job's shaky. I have a bad relationship with my boss. My marriage is a little shaky too. And I don't know how to fix it. I just don't know what to do. And I'm white knuckling through life. And give it to him. Give him the weight of it. And trust in him. And you'll be able to experience peace and joy. And that's the relationship part of Jesus. It's not just the concept. It's like we can say things, but until it moves from our head to our heart, we're not going to experience it. And so, to sum this up, what are the sins of both sides? Well, the East, they say that there is no self. So they shrink themselves into oblivion, literally, which makes them isolated and unfortunately useless. The West enlarge themselves they grow themselves and they say eventually through their actions, I am God. Only through the middle can you find Jesus, which is, I understand that I'm not in control of everything and that I can't curate perfect circumstances and manifest whatever thing that I want, because that would make me God. But I also understand that I need to be capable and I need to be useful and serve my neighbor. And so I trust in Jesus that I will try my hardest to do what I can, and whatever I cannot do, He will cover. And that's how I think you merge East and West. And so I'm going to be continuing to go through this more and more. Obviously, these are a little bit newer thoughts. I've been writing about a lot of this stuff. Eventually my writing is going to come out, dude. And when it does, I'm curious what you guys think. So if you want a little sneak peek, you guys let me know.